Well, I'm back again, and as you can see here, I decided what to do with it. I was playing around with removing some of the purfling here around the sound hole because it got a little bit melted as I was taking some of this finish off, and as I was taking it out, whatever glue they used to put that in tore out huge chunks of the sound hole around the rosette as I was removing it. And at that point, I decided, well, okay, the integrity of the soundboard is compromised. I don't think I'm going to refinish this thing. Let's take it apart further and see what it's made of. And so, following in the spirit of driftwood guitars, who I greatly admire, I took my pull saw and I cut it apart so you can see what it looks like inside. So let's talk a little bit about what we see in here. One of the big things is the soundboard thickness. It's relatively thin, especially compared to what I've seen from other Asian makers. Even a high quality company like Eastman, when you look at the thickness of their soundboards, they are beefy, whereas this thing is relatively thin. It looks more akin to what you might see on a Martin. It's a relatively, thin profile soundboard. And the braces, while not the prettiest, are relatively small. They're not as big or thick as I've seen in kind of mass market branded Asian guitars. They're kind of thin in profile. And actually, let's see. Let's get out the calipers and find out exactly how big this thing is. I happen to have some over here. You can see one of the things I was talking about earlier here, which is the bridge plate. It's pretty blown out right from the beginning, and it came to me that way too. You can see my slotting marks in there from when I slotted the bridge. But before that, all that chew up around the holes, that was already there. So that's something that's kind of disappointing to see in a brand new guitar. Obviously, you have to temper your expectations when it comes to an instrument like this because it's made more for appearances than anything else. But, you hope that they take a little bit more time and just bother to kind of back up the drill when they go about going after that bridge plate drilling, because if that bridge plate wears out, it's pretty tough to get to. It's not easy to remove one of those. You can patch them, but it's a significant undertaking. And this is a soft material, the soundboard. I'm not sure if this is like a real spruce or if this is maybe, some other kind of wood that's similar. Could be a cedar or something like that, although it doesn't really look like it or smell like it. But all in all, that's a little disappointing. Not the end of the world. You're getting a pretty cheap guitar with one of these things. You probably shouldn't expect too much in the way of longevity. If you get 10, 15 years out of this thing, that's not too bad for the price you pay. Let's take a look at these braces. So let's see how they measure out. All right, so at the X brace here, I'm coming up with 0.275 inches in thickness. And let's take a look at one of these tone bars. Tone bars are coming in at 0.272, so about the same. It's kind of the similar bracing all the way along, except for these little finger braces here, which are about 2.5, 2.6 inches, 0.256 inches, sorry. The side material, let's see if that measures out at about 0.116 inches. And let's check out the top thickness. Let's see, I gotta find a piece of the top that is sort of undamaged by my rosette removal efforts. Okay, I'm gonna go with kind of down here. It's about as close as I can get. And let's see if we can go in a little further, get a better reading. Okay. So, soundboard itself is about 0.236 inches, which is, relatively thin as soundboards go. So I think that contributes a lot to the way these guitars sound, which is, pretty resonant as far as I've seen. Not the most impressive thing I've ever played, and I don't know that the voicing is necessarily anything to write home about, but they resonate, and that's something that you don't necessarily get out of something like a Recording King or something like that. Sometimes they feel kind of stifled by their thick, sturdy builds. And I've seen the inside of a couple of Recording Kings that are, you know, significantly heavier brace than this. So that's pretty much that with the top. You can see the neck block is an interesting sort of three-piece construction here. If you look at the end grain of the wood there, it does not look particularly sturdy. I'm not really a wood expert. I can't tell you too much about that, but it doesn't look like a particularly strong piece of wood, especially if you kind of look, if you look in there. That's a lot of kind of open area between the grain. It could just be a rough cut from the saw, I suppose, but it gives the visual impression of being a relatively weak piece of wood. So, you know, that's that. Let's take a quick second look at the dovetail here. I removed most of the neck material there just to show, you know, how cleanly cut that dovetail actually is. It's quite a nice job, and I think you can see in the other video how neat the fit was. So it's impressive, actually. They obviously do this on a CNC machine, but the fit they're getting there is pretty good. Hard to complain about that. And as far as the back block, looks to be constructed from roughly the same material as the neck block is. Back block is obviously a considerably less structurally important piece, so not necessarily anything super material about that. It is a little odd that the kerfing doesn't extend all the way to the block. And you find, you know, kind of interesting hybrids of approach here. Like here you can see this tone bar is tucked in directly under the brace with no removal of kerfing material. Sorry, tucked in under the kerfing. This one is just kind of chewed up off of it. But then over here, they tucked in the X brace and then did that, you know, pretty neatly actually. And then on this popsicle brace, it's just kind of sitting up against it there. So not the tidiest of work, but it's functional. And, you know, I can't complain about the sound of it. Obviously I can't show that to you, but there's lots of other videos that do. I will tell you, I've watched quite a few of those other videos, and they sound a lot better in person than those videos tend to give you the impression of. Let's take a look at the back. So the back is obviously the piece you're going to see, and it's constructed slightly neater. They are using a much thinner and more tapered series of braces up here than I've seen in a lot of other kind of Asian mass market production instruments. The braces back here are a little thicker. These are more in line with what I've typically seen from an Asian-made guitar, especially a Chinese-made guitar. They tend to be kind of beefy, which is, in my opinion, not as necessary, but it's something that a lot of the makers seem to do. So I think that also probably contributes to the sound, you know, having a little bit lighter bracing up here. And even these braces are not particularly big. Speaking of size, let's take a measurement. So we're looking at 0.433 inches in thickness for the two back braces. And for the front ones, we're looking at 0.318 inches in thickness. So, you know, relatively lightly built for those front ones. And of course, you've got the Martin branding here, which is done, you know, pretty roughly, let's say. It doesn't really look the same as the laser etched branding that Martin does. It's more, looks like it's done with something like a branding iron. And again, you can kind of see, you know, with the neck block, the quality of the wood there looks suspect, let's say. It doesn't look like it's super high quality material. You can see that it's fairly open pore. It seems to be something that's maybe not all that dense, and you know that will impact the guitar. I don't know. My guess would be it has probably more to do with the longevity than anything in the function right away, but that's just a guess. Then the other thing to highlight here, this is gonna be a little tricky to show you on the camera just because it's so thin, but I've kind of scraped away a little bit of the very, very, very thin rosewood laminate to show you the material that's actually making up most of the side wood. And it is some kind of extremely cheap looking filler wood. It looks like basically pressed sawdust when you look at it really close up. So not a particularly strong material. I don't know how much I believe that the back and sides make a huge difference to the sound of a guitar. I've owned some all solid wood guitars that sounded more dead than this one does. And I've heard that story about the famous classical guitar builder who built a top out of solid wood, but the rest of the guitar, the back and sides are made of paper mache, just to prove a point. And I tend to think you can get a pretty good sound no matter what the back and the sides are made of, and obviously Martin's been proving that out with their high pressure laminates and stuff like that. So I don't know how much that's going to impact you, but if you're curious about what makes up the center of that wood, it's a very cheap filler material. And then lastly, I decided, well, I'm going nuts with the saw anyway. Let's go ahead and take a look at the neck. So, let me see if we can get a better focus here. I'm gonna see my belly for a second. Okay, so went through and cut a cross section of the neck so you can see that. Again, looks like a fairly open pored wood. It does not remind me of the mahogany that I've worked with before. I am far from an expert in woods, so I can't say anything for sure. But it just doesn't kind of read that way. Nor does the kind of the pores. They don't look to me the way I've seen mahogany look, with these big, long, streaky pores. And that could be long scratches from the sanding process getting filled with something like a wood filler. I don't know. Hard to say, but just the vibe is off. And this fingerboard material, whatever this is, it smells terrible when the saw starts to cut through it. Just really awful. A very kind of strong chemical smell. So still don't really know what it is, but I think I can say with great certainty it's not wood. Some kind of composite material. It looks pretty decent, you know. It has this kind of weird, like almost like pressed paper kind of appearance to it. But it looks good. You wouldn't really pick it out from a distance. If you look close, you know, you can see, that's not ebony. But it's smooth, it plays nicely. It's kind of got like a low friction type of feeling to the surface here. And the fretwork on this is pretty good, I gotta say it. They're all well nicely seated. So, you know, that's kind of what the neck looks like. Again, nuts made out of bone, and you can see, if I can get the camera to focus right, it's pretty nicely shaped. It doesn't have the slant back that the Martins do, but even some of the newer, you know, made in Mexico Martins don't have that. And they took the time to cut the slots decently. They're a little bit angled here and maybe not perfectly even, but they polished it up well and it functions well. And the action when I got this thing was pretty impeccable. So all in all, this thing it's optimized in the ways that you're gonna feel, let's say. I don't think it's an instrument that you're gonna get a lot of years out of, but if you want something that you can kind of like not care that much about and still get a good playing experience from, I think it'll suffice for that. And for a lot of us, that's all we really care about. So hope you enjoyed this video and you've learned something here, and hope you all have a great day. Bye.